Hello, Charles.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing just peachy.
Just peachy. That's a new one.
Trying to, diversify my vocabulary.
Usually you started off saying living the dream. I thought that was going to become your catchphrase, but you've abandoned that.
Oh, I'm not living the dream anymore. I'm just peachy. So, yeah.
Anything we can do to make it better?
We'll make it work. No, this isn't a therapy session. That's for off the air. But I understand we have some growing audience members.
Yes.
Fan.
I don't know about you, but there are a lot of people who listen to the show and are very kind. And I've gotten some emails. We've gotten some in-person comments. And this morning, I got a text from someone who I've gotten to know over almost a whole year now. They were having a bad day and they put our show on and they said it made them feel a lot better. So it's a tough critic, right? They don't like everything.
Very discerning.
Very discerning. Yeah. They know what they want when they want it and they get it.
And everybody knows that they are very,
very vocal.
Yes. Very vocal.
Very good at expressing that they're not happy in a certain situation or that they are very happy, right away, immediate feedback. And so this was a big win for me personally, but I think it's a big win for the show.
Yes. And so who is this fussy, high demanding new fan that you've known for a year?
It's my infant nephew.
Yes. So, as I was texting you about this, our original plan was to appeal to business leaders and, lifelong Catholics and the other stuff and adults. But you know what? If we end up making a children's show, there's still some success in that.
He doesn't get a lot of screen time, and it's us and Bluey. So that's good. That's a good place to be for a new show to be out there.
This early on in our career, in season 1.
I think Bluey just got a whole little section at Disney park. So when we get picked up, we might have our own theme park. Or I don't know what a white collar's theme park would be. The roller coaster of a finance meeting.
It'd be the ups and downs of the economy. I've already got it. So now, was he reacting to your giant face on a screen talking about? I don't know which episode was it.
I got a picture of it for my sister-in-law, who is a very proud uncle moment. She's very good at sharing all that stuff with me. And he was glued in, like straight up staring at the screen. So not sure if it's because he loves his uncle / godfather, which, can't blame him. Or if it was like he was really interested and fascinated in the details that we were going over. It's hard to tell which episode it was because I wear the same thing every day.
Yes. So, I think, there should be like a prop in the background to delineate.
If I got one of those pull-away calendars that we saw last time we were together, that would have been cool.
Yes, in Rome there. And I still can't figure out where that is. So we were just in Italy, which maybe we'll talk about another time. But a lot of the Vatican offices and gift shops, they have not for sale, but they have these red calendars, and they're very cool looking, and they have like cross keys on them, but I don't know where you buy them. And
someone's got to make them.
They don't just grow on trees.
Internet, do your thing. Find it for us.
Yes. So that will be our next goal. But we are here to talk about so your nephew considers you his hero, I'm presuming, because he saw you on the screen. But we're here to talk about one of my heroes, Milton Friedman. Is that a good segue?
Yeah, that was a good segue. I was going to say my attempt. I was just thinking. I was percolating, so it's on the fly thinking, which I'm not always very good at. But yes, we can say our listeners are our shareholders, and we're all about shareholder value. And I think that's a Friedman quote.
That is, and that's going to be a whole section, so we'll get into that in a minute. We first have to explain who he is, because that's like, you've heard me rant on this many times.
Charles, I know too that Friedman being your hero is controversial in the economic sphere. Is that true?
Well, yeah, because some economists don't like him because he was a free market economist, so he's a big fan of capitalism. Very much like a pop economist is maybe the way to say about it. Like he was known in the culture, right? If you were alive in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. He was like on TV, he'd be on the Sunday shows. And he won the Nobel Prize in economics, so that's a fun little perk. But he's a little controversial because I think for those who prefer more socialist policies, perhaps he would not be a friend, or more government intervention. He was very much a libertarian in sort of political respects. But he has a really interesting life because he was born and raised in the New England, I think in New York.
New York is not New England.
Is it New York part of New England? Why? It's York is in England, and New England,
it's just
New York.
Outside the border. New England is Connecticut and east. So Connecticut to Maine.
Up. Okay, so he's in the whatever New York is. Is that the Mid-Atlantic?
Maybe.
So, all right, let's just see let's appeal to a third party. New England.
Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts.
New England is a region in the United States of America and is bordered by the state of New York. Oh, it doesn't include New York.
This is why Connecticut.
So it's just the
we can say it grew up in the. Yeah. So there's a lot of distinction. Connecticut is a part of a lot of things. So we're a part of New England. We're also the tri-state area, and I've learned outside of the country there are other states that are called tri-states. But where the tri-state area is New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And maybe because we form like a triangle. I don't.
No, it's because I think those three states are so economically linked, right? It's all economics.
Yeah, and then the greater New York area.
Yes, and the Nutmeg Belt, right? So,
Connecticut is the center of the world, as it should be.
As it should be. It's only got 6 counties, and but anyways.
But we're talking about it, Charles. It's always in the conversation.
Cut it up.
Always in the conversation.
Always in the conversation. Well, back to the real conversation. Milton Friedman. I don't remember his middle name. I was going to say it there. But he grew up in New York. He went to Rutgers, I believe. But he grew up in like a very working class, recent immigrant community family, and was, I think, exceptionally bright because he did very well in school and eventually earned a PhD in economics. And he was a professor for a long time at the University of Chicago. So you may have heard of the Chicago School of Economic Thought. That was his world, which gets a lot into monetary policy, which we can talk about in a little bit. I'm really restraining myself from just going on like a very fast rant about all these things.
I'll try to interrupt you. If I'm asleep, then our listeners are asleep too.
Yes. Monetary policy is very interesting.
I'm sure it is to someone.
But anyway, to our listeners, to our shareholders. But I'm just giving the highlights of the bio. During World War II, he was involved with statistical modeling, which was interesting. They were using that to look at weather forecasts and terrain and, size of different forces and what were the odds of success looking at different sort of economic models. And then they would also bring him little scraps of paper, not scraps of paper, but little pieces of a puzzle and a bigger problem. He didn't know what it was, but it was some secret project. It turns out he was involved with the Manhattan Project, unbeknownst to him. So he was doing some economic and data modeling things for them. But he met his wife, Rose Friedman, and I think that in many ways they were a duo, but I think Milton Friedman obviously was the face of the couple. So she was also an economist, but they co-wrote a book together, I think, with several things. And so it's not just Milton, it's Milton and Rose, but Milton Friedman's more of the face and the more well-known side of it. But he advised every president from at least Nixon until Bush Jr., and he said Nixon was the smartest of all the ones he met with. So he didn't mean smart necessarily as in good or always did the right thing, but as far as intellectual capability, which I think
not smart enough to not get impeached.
In other situations. He didn't get impeached. That's why he was smart. So he, Anyway, and also we could talk about monetary policy with Richard Nixon because there was. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying to think about how I should set this up because it's a good punchline. So let's talk about Milton Friedman and so there was some issues going on and and there's some funny business going on with the Treasury Department and Nixon and Friedman had a meeting and Friedman at the end Nixon says just don't blame, I can't remember who it was, the Secretary of the Treasury at the time. And he says, "Don't worry, Mr. President. I don't blame him. I blame you." And so he didn't mince words. And he won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then went to the Stanford, or the Hoover Institute, Stanford. He was out there for a while. So really, really quite an interesting guy. You may have seen his clips on Instagram Reels. They kind of go viral because he would do these town halls, and you go around the country, and he would let people ask him any questions. Like he'd probably give a speech, and then it would end with questions. And the Q&As, he's super sharp. Like the way he lines like up arguments and tears people down. So he's a very good arguer. And he controversially helped teach some of Pinochet's economics people. So Pinochet was a dictator of Chile, and he said, "I want to make my country better economically." There's this Milton Friedman guy, sent some people to go take his classes, and they came back, and they were known as the Chicago Boys. And people blame Milton Friedman for supporting Pinochet. But he's like, "I taught Pinochet's people what I taught everybody, which is, you don't want to have an authoritarian government enforcing economic policy." So, but anyway, there's like 1,000 other things I wanted to say about Milton Friedman in the preamble, but does that kind of help lay the groundwork? He's very short, too, height-wise.
I don't know.
Interesting to you. How tall do you think he was? Let me see.
5'6".
Milton Friedman height.
I don't know.
5'6", do you think?
No way.
He was 5 feet,
That's
0
short.
inches.
No offense to anyone who's...
Yeah, 1.52 meters
That
tall.
is... Yeah, wow, okay. So he would have been like at my chest. Like, that's crazy. That's how tall a fourth grader is.
Yes, but he was a tall man in his ideas.
Yeah, walk tall and carry a big stick or
Yeah.
something like that.
So, yeah. That was Teddy Roosevelt. But
Walking Tall that's a movie that I've never watched.
Yeah.
Maybe. Anyways, no, I think that was a good introduction, Charles. I will have to say, I know Milton Friedman by name. I think a lot of people know Milton Friedman. I know some of my education on Friedman is you and Instagram, so that's where I'm at in my life. But I would say I don't know if I could name another economist, especially like a modern day one. Yeah, because even like Buckley, I wouldn't say he's not an economist. He's more of a political commentator or political strategist, which may have included economic policy, but that wasn't his like crux. We could talk about Buckley one day. That would be so much fun. And then
they were vets. Milton Friedman was on Buckley's show. So
Firing.
They definitely were. Firing.
I almost said
yes.
Firing Squad.
PBS.
And I was like, that's a different show. Totally different premise.
wait, so what shows are you watching? It's a YouTube show, Firing Squad.
Anyway, so yeah, I think part of just like the fact that he was traveling around, going around, and now this is what everyone's doing, right? Town halls, Q&As, and that's how people go viral. And one day we'll take white collars on the road. It's what the people want. That's what my nephew wants.
As we keep telling. Yeah, it's what we're going to wherever your nephew is. Do our live show.
From the audience. If he's, yeah. So I think that's what fascinates me the most about Milton Friedman is just like he's recognizable to the point where even I know who he is. But then also too, I think right, like a lot of his policies are his philosophy, his economic philosophy, is you could call that, or I don't know.
His economic thinking or school, his economic beliefs.
School of thought, yeah. Like I've definitely heard of the Chicago School before. I'd never connected it to Friedman. This is going to be an episode that's going to be tough for me because it's going to show this is where you're the expert, and I'm like, huh?
You're smart about many things that I do not know, such as we'll find something.
But so I want to start with what I know, or what we've talked about before, and I think, and then maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, or if this is a bad place to start. But there's like the 3 or 4 rules, things that he thinks that government should be involved in.
So he says 3 things. Yes. I just want to make sure I get it right. Military defense to protect the nation from external threats. So that's what the government exists for. Enforcing contracts to facilitate voluntary exchange and ensure justice. And protecting individuals from coercion, harm, crimes against themselves or their property. So he was like Milton Friedman. He was like he was like Milton Friedman. He was Milton Friedman. He's like Ron Swanson, who said, right, like, I just, look at me, the government is just one guy in an office who decides who we're going to nuke next, right? So very minimalist on that. But again, I think it's to a lot of economic thinking that you to maximize, and we can do a whole episode on supply and demand maybe someday. But that when you start to have interventions, you can start to disrupt the economy. I always think it's like squeezing a balloon, right? Like if you're trying to get air out of a balloon and you squeeze it, it's like, well, you got it out of there, but you made it bigger there. So if you subsidize one thing, you're going to make it more expensive, or if you tax it, you're going to reduce consumer surplus. Like there's a lot of things that can happen. There's kind of like every action has an opposite and equal reaction, to quote Sir Isaac Newton. So yes, that was his kind of focus, was the government should be centered around those three things. And how would you react to that as a cleric of Holy Roman Church?
I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. I would say the church has maybe more principles on what a government's role is, but because it's concerned with the morality of it. So I think, right, Plato and Aristotle, which is where we derive from with Thomistic theologies, right, that the role of the government is to promote virtue amongst its citizenry, as well as like to make that possible, right? So I think that might fall under his second principle of distributing justice and also making sure there's no harm. So I think that there's there. I think the church would, I don't know, in my mind, it would be like subsections to his 3 points rather than maybe an addendum. But I also think this is important to, maybe we can just make this point, right? I don't think Milton Friedman was a Catholic.
He was not. He was raised Jewish, but was an atheist.
Right. And here's the thing, right? Like that's not a problem, right?
Well, it's a problem
especially
for Milton Friedman, but
well, for salvation, maybe we pray for his soul. We should offer mass for Milton Friedman. That'll be, anyways. That's not a bad idea. But I think it's important to recognize that, like, I think Catholics have a tendency to just like stick in a Catholic bubble, and if it's not Catholic, I can't think of it. I can't do all these things. But good is good, and truth is truth, and those are circular definitions. That's a pet peeve of mine.
So you can be so confident when you say it.
Love is love. I agree. But how are we
today
actually
is today?
Love? It is what it is. We've said nothing in that statement. So, but I think it's important to recognize good and truth when it's out there, even when it's somebody who may be a secularist, maybe a modernist, may not have any faith at all. And so, like, you know, the goal of the show is to take the good in the business world, in the secular world, in people's daily lives, and maybe to baptize it or put it through the lens or the filter of faith. And so I think too, right? Nobody should be like, here in this episode, like, why are they talking about Milton Friedman? He has nothing to do with the church. It's like, well, no, our job is to recognize the good and the benefits of it, see if there's any lack in church teaching or anything that he's missing, and like we can nuance things, right? He can be right on 99 things and wrong on one thing, and we can correct that one wrong thing, right? Like we can add to his policies, right? Like it's building a house, right? If he's got a school of thought, he's well known, right? Maybe that's a strong foundation. It's something that we should look into. And then I'll leave the pulpit now.
No, but I think it's a good point, because it was, when I was reading about Milton Friedman in college, I had always kind of admired sort of the witty comebacks, right, that he would have on college campuses. And I do recommend anyone who wants to know more about Milton Friedman, just like listen to the man himself. He's quite entertaining and captivating, and not entertaining in like a joking way. Like he's got a very good delivery and anecdotes and things. And you can find it on YouTube. Just Google Milton Friedman, you'll find some stuff. And then there's actually a series he came out with, which the production value is very like 1979. So it's the not great production, but it's super solid content, called Free to Choose. But reading about his atheism. And now that being said, I don't think he wasn't overly militant. Like he wrote about centesimum annus. How do you say that, Father? You took Latin. Centesimum
anno. Is that John Paul II's 100th anniversary of Populum Progresso? Leo,
Rerum
Rerum
Novarum.
Novarum.
Something.
Yes, Popular and Progresso is another anniversary of Rerum Novarum.
There's a lot of everyone writing on the anniversary.
Rerum Novarum.
So-
We talked about it on the show, right? It's a very important document in the history of the world and the history of the church.
Yes, and but he talked about that, and so but I think he definitely understood that religion had a place. But it was interesting. Yeah, to your point, like you can kind of reason your way two different ways, right? There's sort of the theology, which is the top down, right? Like here's revealed truth that these things are the way humans behave or thrive or what have you. But versus an economist or a scientist or someone else, social scientist, I guess economics, you're taking the facts on the ground and correlating and identifying patterns and trends, right? And so similar in right, like Charles Darwin, right, who formulated the theory of the origin of species. He was observing things in nature, and it doesn't contradict church teaching because the church does not say, "Oh, it was 7 days." Genesis is more poetic, and it's dangerous to do that. But again, so I think, is that okay? Are you're over there? Where were the dinosaurs?
No, but
Father?
the Darwin's theory is a theory. It hasn't been proven or replicated, right? So, but I get your point, and I'm not an evolutionary denier completely. But sorry, I was making a face, and I got caught up on that. But yes, could God have created the world in 7 days? Yes. Does that mean that's how he did it? Not necessarily.
Anyway, so Milton Friedman, back to
We're taking over the tangent.
Yeah, really. We talked very little about him. No, we've talked plenty about Milton Friedman. He won the Nobel Prize. So let's talk about. So he's a monetary policy fan. For those of you who remember, like your Civics 101, there's fiscal policy and monetary policy. So Keynes, who we'll do another podcast on, John Maynard Keynes, the Lord Keynes, who was really a titan in economic thought. Not one I agree with always and everywhere, but I think he's worth understanding because a lot of people view the world through the Keynesian lens. And he was a fan of fiscal policy. So when there's a recession to counteract economic ills, you prime the pump, you spend money as from the government. And so this is like the New Deal, right? Where the economy was struggling, and we can talk about Great Depression another time. And so the federal government created all these programs to get money into the economy to jumpstart economic activity. So they would start the Civilian Conservation Corps, which would hire people to, clean up national parks. And then those people with their salaries would go buy bread, which would support the bakers, which would support the farmers, right? And so you build some economic activity from a government spark. Versus Milton Friedman said he was not a laissez-faire as far as just leave the economy alone and it'll figure itself out. He was, a big fan of leaving things alone and not trying to intervene too much, but he was a favor of monetary policy, which is the Federal Reserve or the central bank, and the idea that the economy should be influenced only through monetary policy or primarily through monetary policy, and having downturns and booms and busts addressed by raising interest rates and slowing interest rates, controlling the money supply, because that influencing the financial system can influence the broader economy. Yeah, Milton Friedman was a big believer in monetary policy, and that was his preference, was to allow the Federal Reserve as the interest-setting institution to determine how the economy goes. So if we're growing really well, raise interest rates, kind of slow down consumption spending. If we're not doing well, lower interest rates. It makes it easier to get a loan. The loan to build a business, you repay the loan, right? And so it doesn't require deficit spending, which is what fiscal policy does under Keynes. So does that make sense, Father Officer?
I don't think I'll ever understand the Fed, but maybe if we could talk about a concrete example, right? So inflation, that was a big with COVID and the stimulus checks and stuff.
Yes.
So he would have been against the stimulus checks, but for hiring or lowering interest rates.
Yes, and actually, I'm so glad we didn't plan this, but I'm just saying, a bunch of economics people are so glad you brought up this, because the stimulus checks is what Friedman got the Nobel Prize for, saying that's not the right way to address the situation. So, so COVID, the government did a lot of things. It spent more money in COVID than we spent in all U.S. military conflicts combined. So in 2008, global financial crisis, right, huge economic issue, the government spent $700 billion to address the economy. And then
that's bailing out AIG and the car companies and everything, right?
Yeah. All right. So then the 20
and the banks.
Yes, all those bailouts. Everyone gets a bailout. 2020 financial crisis bailout cost was, wait for it, $4 trillion. So quantum trillion is a lot.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I only got like what, $100 check twice.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I needed it.
Yes. Well, I think an important fact right now, and I want to get these right. So 1 million seconds. All right. So 1 million seconds is 11 days, right? Or 11.5 days. 1 billion seconds is 31.7 years. And 1 trillion seconds, 31,000 years. Well, 31,688. So yeah, trillion's a huge number, and we just throw it out like it's not. But $4 trillion was spent from the federal government in fiscal policy, which is a lot of money. And like I think at one point, 1 out of every $5 was created in 2020. So we threw a bunch of money in the economy from fiscal policy. Now the Fed at the same time also lowered interest rates and increased the money supply. So you had it kind of coming from both sides, the monetary and the fiscal policy. And again, I don't fault people for panicking, but you shouldn't have panicked because the crisis was bad, but it was not as bad necessarily. And the problem is that it was hard to undo that. And this is not to be an indictment on Jerome Powell because he's not. There's a lot of complications in how the Fed works. But if it was up to me, I remember texting you in spring of 2020 saying they need to raise interest rates because otherwise we're going to have inflation, right? And you probably said, what am I talking about? And then we had record inflation. And so, not record inflation, but higher inflation than any point in our lifetimes. So yeah, COVID, Friedman would not have been a fan of because the pandemic, but particularly the fiscal response, because we just threw so much money in. And what happens is when you throw in all this money, we had to borrow it, and so you create inflation. And this is another, there's so much Milton Friedman stuff going on right now in my head. So when you increase money supply, you can get taxed in two ways. You can get taxed for the government saying you owe us, IRS, right? Or sales tax, right? There's a very specific, but there's an implicit tax. When they increase the money supply, your money becomes worth less. So you have $1,000 in the bank, but they create a bunch of money by borrowing. It's now worth 20% less. So you can only buy $800 worth of goods with your $1,000 instead of buying $1,000 of goods. So Milton Friedman talked about that. But what he won the Nobel Prize on was he said, unexpected stimulus is typically saved. So, right, if you are given a stimulus check from COVID, Milton Friedman said, and won the Nobel Prize for this, that unexpected income will be saved. And he was famously asked, this is a Father Lambertser moment now, around the time he won the Nobel Prize, they said, well, with winning the Nobel Prize, you get $1 million cash prize, is what I think it is or it was. Given that this is unexpected, will you be spending it or saving it? Because he said, if it's unexpected, you'll save it, you won't spend it. And he turned to the reporter and said, who said it was unexpected? Which, is very much in his humor. Also around Nobel Prize season, you'll notice a lot of Chicago University economists start getting haircuts and waking up earlier in case someone from the Scandinavian countries calling them to tell them that they've won. But yeah, so he won that. And yeah, so he would not have been a fan of the stimulus checks. But again, the thought of the government was we give money to the people, they'll spend it, they'll keep the economy afloat, right? There was other things done to help support. And again, I mean, shutting down, like there's a case for intervention, but at least I think Freedom in principle would not have been a fan of that being the first.
So then what about the claims or, I don't know, claims or statements that like the economy bounced back and it was the strongest ever? Was that like a campaign slogan, platitude, or is that true to the economy? For a while, it was doing pretty well. I feel like we were doing well.
Well, yes, during COVID. It did. Well, it didn't. The stock market, which is, I remember there's a good quote I heard. The stock market's not the economy, but it's not the economy.
That's my understanding of
it. Sounds like something you would say. It's a good indication of investor sentiment. And so, yes, in around St. Patrick's Day 2020, the economy tanked. The stock market tanked, and then it shot back up. And there was a lot of I mean, yeah, we went into a recession. Unemployment rate went really high. Like if you look at economic graphs, I remember in school, you'd see in 2008 this blip when things would not work the normal smooth lines, and there was similarly a blip in 2020, right? A lot of people were laid off, restaurants couldn't work, right? So there was definitely, and we did bounce back, but it bounced back uneven. And I think we should do a whole episode on COVID maybe because it's complicated, but we may have, to sum it up. We did a lot of things. We maybe did too much, and then we reaped the whirlwind with high prices and inflation and other things.
So the thing is, like, the economy is that we didn't get plummeted into a depression. That's like the success of COVID.
Well, yes, we didn't go into depression. Yeah, well, I guess you could say it's successful, but we spent $4 trillion. Did we have to spend $4 trillion? Like the big stimulus bill that they passed, it redid sunscreen regulations. It gave the metro rail system, which I'm a big fan of the metro, it's right there, and it gave them a year's worth or more than a year's worth of revenue, despite the fact they were still somewhat operating under COVID. So, like, people were getting so much money, and there was, waste, fraud, and abuse, to use a common parlance. So, yeah, and then
isn't it a Milton Friedman line too? There's no I think he said it right. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
I am so proud of you. Look at this. Did you just Google a bunch of Milton Friedman quotes right before?
No,
yes.
I'm surprised that stuck. It's the idea too, right? That actually, I think I heard it from our friend in Rome, who said it because her father's an economist. Right? Yeah, like free money wasn't really free. Like, we are paying for it.
Exactly. Yes.
Hidden tax.
The government can only make money one way, by taxing you, and or taxing someone else. And so, yes, and recognizing that, or it borrows it, I guess. But yeah, so there's no such thing as a free lunch. That was another Milton Friedman quote. He's quite quotable. And but recognizing that there is no silver bullet that solves all of our problems without a cost. And I think at least I know a lot of people are big fans of him. Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, is a big disciple of Milton Friedman himself, being a former economics professor. And you can see he's governing as if Milton Friedman was governing in a lot of ways. And maybe not so much the eccentricities and the haircut, but in terms of economic policy. And Argentina is doing pretty well, despite having historically not done very well economically. So this stuff does work that Friedman talks about. And it's been applied around the world. Yeah.
I'm making a connection here in my head. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think I'm right, because I think we've talked about this before. So then it's the same thing. The stimulus checks almost is the same thing with the tariffs, right? That the taxes maybe go to foreign countries and to importers, but that just gets transferred to consumer prices and stuff. And so the idea that Italy, Europe, or whatever is paying for it, it just means, but those companies then who have to pay for it are going to hike up prices. And I think we see that like in Rome too, right? When we were doing shopping, like, it's easier to buy it there and ship it home, or pay for the checked bag rather than to like order it online and have it shipped, because then the tariffs kick in on certain things and the prices change exponentially.
Exponentially. That's a big word. I don't know how to spell it. But yes, but no. So Milton Friedman, again, it's against tariffs. He said, I'm for reducing taxes for any reason, anytime, any situation or something. That was his general kind of dogma. And a tariff is a tax on imports. And so, yes, who's it paid by, right? And it depends on how price sensitive the good is. So if, for example, you're willing to spend, $40,000 or $50,000 on a BMW, and the tariff is 10%, but you are willing to spend $60,000 on a BMW, then you'll still pay the consumers will pay the tariff, right? But if it's very price sensitive, where actually people will not pay a penny more for whatever they're importing, then then the producer eats it. And they may say, hey, we're not going to export to the U.S. because we can't make money. So a tariff is a tax, and it creates either cost to the producer, to the consumer, or to both. So yeah, it definitely, but it does have an inflationary impact, broadly speaking. Yeah, tariffs are not good, and that's something Milton Friedman would be very much against. He was for lots of free trade, and that was something that really has boomed and created a lot for the world as a whole, is that, we've been able to help countries with lower costs of labor, maybe, produce goods and export them to the U.S., And so we get cheap goods, they get to be employed, and everyone's better off, right? Now, there's obviously challenges when jobs get exported overseas, and so they close a plant here. And I think there's nuance to that. I think it could have been handled maybe differently because there's I think it's America, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland are known for having the highest quality manufactured goods. And so rather than try to make the cheapest thing in the U.S., try to make the best thing in the U.S. And I think Shinola is a good example of this, right? So they used to make cheap watches in the U.S. and now it's almost non-existent. But Shinola is a company in Detroit that is assembling watches, and that they're luxury watches, and they can with luxury products, the cost is higher, and so you can afford to pay American wages. And so that's why, in Switzerland, they did the same thing in the quartz crisis, where quartz watches were being made very cheaply in Japan, and the market sank out. And so Rolex and Omega and all these other companies moved to making luxury goods and higher quality, and really taking advantage of the craft. So I think there's a lot of that could have happened, and I can understand people's frustration with sort of a free trade solution, but in the aggregate, we're all better off, and in the long run, we're better off. And John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So,
well, okay, let's play a game. You're Secretary of the Treasury, you're the Treasurer of the United States, right? I'm not sure this is a game. Whatever, you're the Secretary of the Treasury. I'm sure you've never played this game before by yourself. So Friedman wants to lower taxes, cut taxes all the time, right? Now, I'm smart enough to know that you can't just cut spending, but you also have to increase revenue. So cutting spending and raising taxes seems like the best way for the government to make money, but that doesn't always help the consumer, the taxpayer. So how do you cut spending and lower taxes and still have a sustainable government?
Oh, that's a very good point. So I think, it has to be measured, right? So I don't think Friedman would be a big disciple of deficit spending, even at the expense of just cut taxes to zero, but still spend like there's no tomorrow. And so, I think you could reduce both. The less the government spends, the less you have to tax. And so that's a way to go about it. I think there's people on both sides who don't want to either raise taxes, but want to increase spending, or don't want to decrease spending but want to decrease taxes. And we're in an unsustainable fiscal path in the United States. We are spending a lot more money. I think our annual deficit is about $900 billion. So in our total our discretionary budget is $1.9 billion, or $1.9 trillion, which is everything but Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid. So, sorry, that's a lot. But so what I would do is I would reduce, and this is the thing Milton Friedman talked about, because welfare, right? So there was his solution to address welfare is that we had all these competing government programs trying to address poverty. And he said, why don't we have a universal basic income? And now before everybody turns off, there's many different formats of universal basic income. And the one Milton Friedman argued for, simplistically, we'll just use round numbers. If you say $50,000 is our floor, no one in the U.S. is going to make less than $50,000. But the government will subsidize 50% of how much you make up until you make $50,000. Because that way, if you're making zero, you get a check for $25,000 a year. If you make $25,000 a year, they write you a check for $12,500 or $12,250, which is half of 12 and the difference, right, between 50 and 25, how much you're making. Half of the difference. So, and what that does is that encourages you to always better yourself economically, because some economic programs, you get a job or you make money, you lose your benefits, all of them, right? It's not tapered. And so and Milton Friedman said he doesn't blame people for taking advantage of a welfare apparatus that supports not working. If you're paid more to not work, why would you work, right? Friedman didn't think that was silly. He said it's silly to set up a system like that, but not for the people to take advantage of a system. And but I think his thought is you get a growing economy, and you can, by reducing taxation and reducing spending, you have more organic growth. And therefore the economy can take care of itself. And also the government can still fund itself. But he wanted to restructure all welfare to just that universal basic income. So get rid of TANF and food stamps and everything and just have a pure cash transfer. And so, but there's been other types of universal basic income. Some say everybody gets $50,000 a year no matter how much they make. It's well, that doesn't make sense because that's inflationary and eventually prices will increase. Others say, well, everybody makes at least 50. So if you make 45, we'll give you 5,000. Well, then it doesn't encourage anyone to work until you're making $60,000.
Well, and I think one of
yeah.
our friends said this in a talk that he recently gave in the city, that one of the best things that we can do as Catholics, but just like for the dignity of the human person and for the economy, is to create more jobs and to employ people and give them that work and that quality of life and that paycheck, right? So like creating jobs, and I don't like it's part of like human ingenuity and everything like that, right? Like this is the problem with people who are saying like population control, like we're running out of food or anything. It's like it takes out the human spirit. Like survival mode basically means that we'll find a way to produce more food. Like, and the amount of food that we waste is kind of crazy. But more people creates a problem, but it also creates more solutions and more people thinking and working towards the solutions. But my understanding of this is like if you wipe out the problem by just giving people money or something like that, then you're also stopping the creativity and the solution. And then also like where's the dignity like of like of our relation to our work, right? Like private property and like I am entitled to the fruits of my labor.
Yes, no, it's a really good point. Yeah, and I think Friedman would be a big believer that there's dignity in work and having gainful employment and kind of owning your own success. And he talks a lot about, to your point, on one of his famous thoughts was think of a grid, right, or a box with 4 boxes in it divided into 4. And he says you're most efficient spending your own money on your own problems, right? So you make $10, you go to the grocery store, you're going to make that $10, work most effectively. And he had a hierarchy of, and you're less efficient. You get very stingy when you're spending your money on other people, right? And so it's like, all right, well, here's $10, but like, these are what you can buy at the grocery store if you're giving it to somebody. And then you're not efficient if someone gives you $10 to go spend money. It's like, oh, someone gives me $10, I'm going to go buy a donut because I got a donut. Like it's free $10. I'm going to give something above what I need. And he says, and you're least efficient in economic terms when you're spending other people's money on other people's problems. And that's the government in a nutshell on welfare. In his view, is that a lot of these programs, you have people in an office making decisions arbitrarily that don't directly impact them. And aren't their money directly. And so it's like you have these billions floating around back and forth, and it's just like it's unaccountable. And that's kind of what you saw after COVID with some of the stimulus efforts, is that it was just wasteful, right? Don't let a scandal go to waste, to quote the former mayor of Chicago. And yeah, people took advantage of a lot of things there to get funding for things that really probably didn't need funding, at least in a COVID type environment. And so, yeah, but you're most efficient spending yours. So that was his thought, is like, how do you give people that? And he talks about rational self-interest a lot, which I think can get a bad rap. People think, oh, it's selfishness. And he's like, no, self-interest is doing what you want. He said, if you want to make more money to give to charity, or because your religion shows that there's value in hard day's work, you're pursuing your self-interest. If you're doing it to take care of your family, that's your self-interest, right? It's not it's the interest of what you yourself is thinking, not just purely for yourself. And I don't know, Father Lamas, maybe there's a better way philosophically or using English words to sparse how you can be self-interested but not selfish. And he talks a lot about that.
Well, yeah, and I mean too, right? Like the more money you make, the more you can give away.
That's right. Yes, and actually, a friend of ours who's very successful, he talks about how liberating that is. Because at first, there's a great guilt when you're worth, so much more than the average American, which is already worth so much more than the average person on the planet right now. But when you realize, wait, I can use this as a tool for good, the wealth that I've made, it's such a liberating and exciting experience. And now you're making money to give more money away and to do all that. So it is exciting. But I realize we are getting good into the show, so I think we should talk about the Friedman doctrine. Is that okay? Which is not a doctrine of Holy Roman Church, but a doctrine of the Chicago School. So the quote, Milton Friedman, you can read about it. It was published in the New York Times a while ago when he was alive, and it became very controversial. But he talks about that the purpose of a corporation is to generate shareholder value. And some people have taken that, Gordon Gekko in Wall Street, when he says greed is good and that you have to just make a profit and everyone else, who cares, right? Exploit, cheat, pour pour your leftover pollutants in the river that the children swim in. And some people say that's shareholder value. You were most profitable because you cut corners and you got rid of safety regulations. And I think that's people who have misused what Friedman said, because in that article, he said, I'm going to read this whole quote because it's very important, and particularly one line. So, in a free enterprise private property system, a corporate executive is an employee of the owners of the business, so the shareholders. He has direct responsibility to his employers. That responsibility is to conduct business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible while conforming to the basic rules of the society, both those embodied in law and those embodied in ethical custom. So that first part, people who know Milton Friedman think of that line, oh, profit at any price, right? Or that you're supposed to maximize for your shareholders, because the shareholders, right, give money to start a business and they hire executive to run it, right? Or maybe the owner is also an operator. And you have to act in what their plan is, right? If they hire you to build an apple orchard and you build a bunch of, palm trees, it's like, that's not what they hired you to do. So you're, not following the just authority that's implied through them hiring you. But what's most important is he says, which is right, their desires. Generally, we make as much money as possible. And then here it is, while conforming to the basic rules of the society, both those embodied in law and those embodied in ethical custom. And everybody forgets that. Everybody, even people who I agree with on 99% of things, but don't like Milton Friedman, they don't like that. And it's embodied in law and embodied ethical custom. You cannot break the law and you cannot violate basic morality and ethical principles, right? Natural law, Christian morals, right? Whatever you want to call it. So Friedman has a carve out. So it's not, yes, you want to maximize shareholder value, generate a profit for your shareholders as they've asked you to do, but you can't exploit your workers. You can't break the law. You can't, steal. You can't cheat in contracts. You can't take advantage of people. So and Friedman, he talks about this, all of his writings. Like when I was reading him, I'm expecting a little more cold, calculated. Like he talks all about morality and responsibility to society and ethical framework. So you've got me worked up, Father Lomnitzer, but...
well, it's an important
You've heard me
distinction.
rant about this many times.
I think this is people's biggest criticism of a capitalistic society. But in Caritas in Veritate that Pope Benedict XVI wrote, he talks about how the church would support the free market system the most because it allows for the most human flourishing. But he talks about not a free market without regulations of morality, right? An ethical free market. And so this idea of you could have a free market with no regulations, no laws and all this stuff, but the natural law would still be the governance behind a free market, right? And this is I want to talk about this book so bad. So we're a lot of teasers today too, right? Good Profits by Charles Koch, who talks about, right, this idea of what is a good prophet is that he produces relationships and products that build trust and long-term clients rather than it's easy to make a quick buck. I think this is what the Bush School too is at Catholic University is trying to teach too, right? It's yes, you can make more money. You can make money doing unethical things, cheating, stealing, whatever it is, embezzling, all that stuff. But you can also have an ethical business, and that will make you more money in the long term and have a business that has a recognizable name, something that people trust. And it's more, I think, right, generating shareholder value and all that stuff, right? I think it becomes a problem when money is the end of it, right? Obviously we want to create profits, but we're maximizing profits for something else, right? Money is a means to an end. It helps us to do all these things. One of them being charitable outreach, right? I said once, poverty
donate to your parish, right? So
yeah, donate. Yeah, the church needs it. Poverty is expensive.
Our Veritas Catholic Radio.
Yeah. It's you are our shareholders. Use a crowdsource funded radio. We're brought to here. It was the old PBS thing. Thanks to our support from viewers like you.
Yes, so listeners like you. But yeah, no, poverty is expensive. What you were saying.
Yeah, poverty is expensive in the fact that it costs a lot of other people money to make sure that those who live a life of we say this I know, right, that my salary, the things that I have is from the generosity of other people, right? I wouldn't, and that's why if the church is in a financial crisis or whatever, at least this is how we do it. in the diocese and the priest that I'm friends with, right, the first thing that we would cut is like, okay, I won't receive, I don't, it's technically a salary, but it's more of a stipend, right, that we get as priests. So like if the parish was in dire straits or like financial mismanagement or whatever, I know priests who have done this, right, like they don't take that money, they put it back in until it gets to a place where then the priest can get paid, right, because I don't take a vow of poverty, I live a life of simplicity, and I know that's a point of contention to my friends who know me. But thank you for just laughing, and I saw you swallow your comment. We were just in Rome last week. But anyways, that idea of like, yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch. We need money to help and support people that matter to us. But if money becomes an end, right? This is what St. Paul says. Very important for our listeners and all Catholics out there in the world, right? He doesn't say money is the root of all evil. I think there are a lot of socially minded people who say money is the problem, and this is the idea of like take from the rich, tax the 1%. And you know, there may be an argument for that, but the arguments that they're making are not the good ones, are not the right ones. But this idea that love of money is the root of all evil, that's what St. Paul says, right? So when money becomes an end and an object of it itself, that's where things start to get really, really dangerous. So I think too, right? Like, yeah, and a shareholder, they're, like you said, like the palm trees versus apple trees, right? Like they just may, like, I love apple trees and I want more apple trees in the world. Like it's not about the money for them, but they need to be bringing in a revenue to be able to plant more apple trees, right? So I think it's a lot more nuanced than like, yeah, when you just clip a quote.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I think people, clip the quote and peg it into whatever they want. Either it justifies their greed and their love of money, or it justifies we need to tear the system down. And fun fact, even if you tax the top 1%, 100% still would not cover our current deficit. So we can't even increase the spending to do the programs that we want. But anyways, but yeah, and also Friedman, when he talks about, right, embodied in law and those in ethical custom, he was, interestingly, and I remember reading this in his books, he was a fan of environmental regulations. And you're like, what? He was a fan of environmental regulations. I thought he was like the free market guy. And he is. But his thought is, right, he would be okay with like tobacco, right? Like you can buy a cigarette. He said, as long as everybody knows the consequences of, he says, like smoking cigarettes. There's actually a thing he did with a video on this. He's like, I think you're dumb for smoking cigarettes because it's going to kill you, right? And there's no positive other than makes you feel good. And that being said, he said, you should be allowed to choose to buy cigarettes if you want to in a society. You have the freedom to do the right thing or the freedom to do the wrong thing. But he said, you can't, with environmental regulations, if I buy, tires from you and you're just like pouring, I don't know what you make tires out of, but rubber, but if you're like putting the extra rubber in the kids' playground and they're like chewing it and choking on I don't know, I think I have a better example here. You're
putting lead.
You're selling chemicals, lead in paint. Yes. And he said, but if that's not fully disclosed, the dangers and all these things, is that third parties can be harmed by it, right? And so, like, if smoke comes out of my chimney, where does it go? It goes everywhere, right? And so Friedman was okay with environmental regulations, particularly when it affected third parties. And he was also a fan of the social safety net. He said, we're one of the wealthiest countries, we are the wealthiest country in the world. There's no reason we should have, not a robust system to protect the poor at the state level. Now, I think we can talk about how that would work best from a Christian perspective, because we don't want to outsource charity completely. But he wasn't this miserly, just maximize profit. Like these are things he talked about, which I think can be surprising to some people. And your point though on, maybe the shareholders have different intent, because his next sentence is, a group of persons might establish a corporation for a charitable, my word, his purpose, for example, a hospital or school. The manager of such a corporation will not have money as a profit as objective, but the rendering of certain services. So again, you're following what's the point of setting up the charter that started your organization. So, and it's funny because it's all in that quote. Like that's all back to back. Like people, I could see one thing, he's like, make a profit. And then later I was like, and don't forget to follow the law. Like he's like, make a profit and follow the law and follow ethical norms. And it's like, I don't know why. I'm going to get like a t-shirt that has that whole quote and like underlines the parts people forget. So yeah, but if I can have at least enlightened one of our listeners who didn't know that, I will have considered this podcast.
It's become a social media trend, right? Is like what gives you purpose in life or what makes you happy is like creating shareholder value. And it's very
Yes, but it's
it's
like
very
tongue in
funny.
cheek, right?
The finance bros that are out there on social media, which I've been described as a finance bro. It's actually tangent. Uh, a lady, a parishioner, I said mass. I was helping out a priest friend at a neighboring parish, and a parishioner who was friends with someone who was there said, yeah, they were described. They said of a priest dressed like a finance bro and pulled up in his truck. She goes, "Oh, that's Father Lomnitzer." I was like, "I'm so glad that's those were my identifying adjectives."
Well, you do wear your vest, so you'd fit into the Midtown uniform quite well.
Yeah, I'm here to smell like the sheep. But yeah, I think too, right? Like, yeah, I think shareholder value, even in that sense, right? Like people don't try to understand what that means, right? Like the charter of the company or something. And I think that's also why it's good to like look and investigate. There's some companies out there who are not ethical and are doing bad things, but there are a lot of companies who are doing really amazing and wonderful things, and who are publicly owned and operated or traded, right? Whatever the term is. So,
Probably true.
but I also think too is like
Which they are publicly owned as well, but
yeah, but like as a consumer too, right? Like there has to be some discernment in who we're giving our money to and what their values are, and like this isn't just like, because I think too like that's the idea behind regulations is we have to dictate what the company does and all this stuff. It's like, well, yeah, and we saw this with some companies, right? People who boycott certain things for certain reasons, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It's really hard, I think, to get an entire population to boycott one company, right? There are always going to be people who are loyal and true to a brand, or it's just there. So I think too, as much as like the free market principles apply to businesses, I think they also should apply to the consumer.
yeah, no, yeah, you should have the ability to choose where you spend your money, right? And having a plethora of choices, right, is good. So having the economic diversity, and this gets back to the quote. I can't remember which founding father it was who said that our Constitution is for a morally and religious people and is unfit to govern anyone else. And the founding fathers, I think, understood this. And Friedman and other kind of like is that the whole point of freedom is that if you have a moral society and a society that knows right from wrong, and would to that point, like if you're going to buy a product and your truck, and one is made with child labor and they don't follow the rules, and it's cheaper, that you'd have a society that would say, sorry, we're not interested, even though it's cheaper, right? Because you're cutting corners and it's not a safe truck, right? And so Friedman talks a lot about making sure people have as much information about their economic choices as possible. So, whether it's what they're investing in, like so they know who the company is, what they do, what their results are, what their strategy is. But from a consumer perspective, all the ingredients, like the nutrition label, like he'd be okay with that because it's saying, hey, here's all the ingredients. If you want to eat all the weird chemicals, that's your prerogative. But you that, and you made that decision, right? But if you have a moral society, and this I think people don't understand, is that they're all like, back to food, right? Like we have a lot of unhealthy food in America, and some of it's very delicious, right? And it's been engineered to make us want to keep eating it and all these things. But people are like, oh, they got to stop selling that. It's like, why don't we build a society where people don't demand that? Because the market will supply what you want. And yeah, to your point on boycotting, if all of a sudden people say, no, what, I'm going to be buying more lettuce and carrots instead of, I won't name some of the bad products, but things that are wrapped up in Mylar and plastic and boxes. That's like in the center of a grocery store. If enough people do that, the market will provide it. If we demanded things that taste good and are bright colors and make us feel good for 30 seconds, and then we feel like gross afterwards. So if you build a society that demands the right things, you'll get the right results. And so I think that's where
Yeah, and I'm thinking like why fast food is so cheap, but salads and organic stuff are so expensive. That's because the demand is not really there for that.
Right? Yeah, to get it to scale. And I mean, right now it's more expensive to make a salad, right? Because you got to keep it fresh, right? Versus you can freeze whatever and keep it around. You can have these chemicals. So you can make things cheaper. But yeah, if enough people demand it, this is the wonderful thing about economics is like it solves all the problems in the world. But like,
Jesus does.
Jesus was an economist.
The economy of
in this hidden years.
Talked about.
Yeah. But no, to that point, if economies of scale, right, if everyone wants a salad every day at lunch, the price will come down because now like the supply chain and economies will reorient themselves to that, right? So now it has to be careful because demand, right? If demand increases, prices increase. But then more producers say, okay, we're going to create that good. And so then prices decrease. So, and this is the thing that I think people don't understand is that you have to be patient in an economy. Because yes, in the long run, we're dead, but in the long run, things start to pan out. So you can have short-term things like, oh, we threw a bunch of money into COVID. It prevented a lot of people from going into poverty and missing mortgage payments and all these things, which is good. But then it also created inflation, right? And we're still reeling with the effects of that. And there were certain industries that were propped up and other things. And so understanding that long-term thing, and I think to your point earlier, right, like it's about partnerships. And so a company that takes shortcuts is not going to be the company people want to buy stuff from in the long run, right? They're going to want to get the higher quality product at the better price. But again, some people value things that are cheaper. And so it's how you build a value system that orients a free economy. Because if you don't have the right values, then freedom doesn't work.
Yeah. I've always referred to it as like the Jose Maria understanding of poverty. Jose Maria Escriva, right? Is like I can spend $20 on a pair of cheap shoes that's going to last a year, and then I'm spending $20 every year on a pair of cheap shoes. Or I can spend $100 on a pair of shoes that'll last me 10 years. And eventually, right, I'm saving money in the long run, even though it's an upfront expense because I'm buying a better quality product and all this stuff. And so I think we have an idea, we're like looking at price tags and certain things, right? The cheaper option is good. And sometimes that's just what you're forced to buy at times. But like when it comes to decisions like that, like this is something I need every day. I use it every day. Like I should invest in it because yes, it's a upfront cost, but I'm saving that money every year and it eventually will pay off.
Yes. So yeah, but at the same time, having a $20 shoe, right? There's some people who can't afford a $100 shoe. They don't have the cash, right? But now they can get a shoe for $20. And so that's the advantage in an economy is that there's, billions of decisions being made by all of us economic actors every day. And so I think there's some people who say, well, all shoes need to be worth $20. All shoes need to have the quality of $100. And it's like, well, yes, to that example, if you can afford a $100 shoe that's going to last you more than 5 years, you're better off economically and the quality is appreciated. But some people say, hey, I can only afford a $20 pair of shoes. Well, you can get a $20 pair of shoes, right? And if the economy is growing, your wages will be growing, and maybe later on you can purchase the $100 shoe, right? And I think, again, this is a real peril of our generation, is we have not seen protracted economic growth in our lifetime. We saw a little bit right before COVID, right, where the economy was humming and people were hiring. But I mean, we grew up in the global financial crisis. We're growing up in kind of the post-COVID lag, right? And so we haven't seen like the economic engine of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, where the U.S. economy was humming, wages were increasing, jobs were being created, companies were starting up. And so it's how do you encourage that economic growth? Because economic growth can really increase quality of life. It reduces poverty. It creates more opportunities. It allows for better work-life balance. It can create a lot of the solutions to material problems we have, right? But then it creates more time for spiritual things. And so, right, and also, right, isn't that okay, Father?
Yeah,
that's it. So
great.
If the economy gets so efficient, we get 3-day weekends. Make sure you go to Mass on one of those 3 days.
That's why the weekend, right? Like the work week, right?
Was invented by Christians.
Leisure and everything. It's very important, right? We don't work to take vacation.
Some of us do, but yeah. Wasn't that Joseph Pieper's big thing? Leisure is the basis of culture.
Yes, leisure is very important. But yeah, that's not like the end of work, right? We talk about, that's another good book to talk about on the White Collar's recommended reading list. And that's our show for today. Charles, thank you for lending your expertise and not making me feel so inferior.
Thank you for listening to me rant about one of my favorite things to rant about.
Well, it's productive when it's recorded and not just like, oh, okay. Nobody asked for this conversation.
The Latin Rome, a lot of just eyes rolling. And what did you say?
Oh, you were talking again? But leave a review. Let us know how you like the show. We love the reviews, especially the positive ones. See you next week. And as always, work hard and pray harder.